Hello, everyone, and welcome to our study. This is study number 18, and we took a bit of a break, but now we are back focusing on prophecy. And we do live in critical times, but I think I was speaking to someone yesterday, no, 2 days ago, and she was saying, "What do you think the future holds?" And then she said something like, the next 8 years are going to be really, really hard. And I was wondering, what kind of inside information do you have? You are being very precise. Why 8 years and not 6 or 9? And I think there needs to be some measure as people of the Bible and as people of faith. There has to be some balance, some measure of understanding of the kind of and type of times that we live in, but at the same time of faith, of hope, and of courage. And I think that this is exactly what the book of Revelation is all about. I think some people are misunderstand it, misrepresent it, movies and books. The book of Revelation, I believe, is full of warnings, but also it's full of hope. And it provides us with information, with knowledge, with a glimpse of what the future will hold. But at the same time, it focuses on us being prepared and encouraging us to be closer, to stay close to God and get closer to God, so that we can face it in a way that will be a positive witness to people who are scared and frightened and unsure and confused. Now, the title of the lesson today is "Time is Running Out." And again, it can be seen like, wow, we need to be scared, we need to be frightened. When someone says that your time is running out, that's not good news. But I think that it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the situation. And if we are to think within the greatest scheme of things, that this world is a world of sin and of suffering, and it's not the reality that God intended when he created this world, the fact that this kind of reality, the time for suffering, the time for violence, the time for things that make us sad and mad and hurt, is running out. That's good news. So let's look at the lesson. It focuses on Revelation 17 and 18. Now, these are not easy chapters to cover. They are not easy chapters to study. And again, like I've done before, we're not going to go into details, into every single little detail. It will take us too long. And also, I think that sometimes, I've said it before, when it comes to actually looking at the book of Revelation, we have to be cautious. We need to allow the Bible to interpret itself, and we need to be careful not to go beyond that which the Bible is clear in interpreting. And I like the way the lesson today, the lesson today is a very clear example of what it means to look at the Bible as a whole. Because something that happened in the Old Testament is the key to unlock the passages that we're studying tonight. So Revelation 17 and 18, I always put this slide up, and I think that today, this lesson is even more relevant in this respect, because it does take us into the past. It takes us into the history of Israel, and we need to learn very important lessons from that time. Because these two chapters in Revelation provide us with a parallel with, or is a parallel with, or it provides us with imagery from the time of prophet Jeremiah. All right? And right at the beginning of the lesson, there is a beautiful description of what this is, and how Jeremiah received a message from God to warn the people of Israel to get out of Jerusalem and to get out of their cities because of the pending threat of Babylon. And it says here that Jeremiah was beaten, he was placed in stocks, the prophet couldn't be silenced. He kept pleading with Israel to accept the discipline of their God. And so King Zedekiah threw Jeremiah into a dungeon, but he kept speaking. Israel was going to have to let go of its sacred temple. The people were going to have to leave the city that had grown hopelessly corrupt. And he kept on warning, God has told me you need to leave, you need to get out, you need to surrender when the threat comes. And nobody wanted to listen. So officials lowered Jeremiah into a well where he sank into the mud and almost starved to death. And there's a picture here on the screen, a depiction of that. So the lengths to which people who were expected to know, to trust the prophets, the lengths to which they went to silence this message, to silence this man. Because it just didn't match their ambitions and their desires, and he was just a troublemaker. And that's why I think there are many voices that want to silence the message of the book of Revelation, and we need to. I commend those who are taking the time to study it, to listen to what it says, because it's important for us. So it says here, still this courageous prophet kept pleading. His people faced the most important choice of their lives. It was clear they had to choose one way or the other. And part of Jeremiah's message was, he who remains in the city will die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes out and defects or surrenders to the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, he shall live. This is Jeremiah 21, verses 8 and 9. And so this is, again, very important that we understand that part of the history of Israel, because you see, the prophets of the New Testament did not write in isolation. They were inspired from, they used imagery from the Old Testament, because the people they were writing to, they were familiar with those writings, and they could understand. Now, we also need to familiarize ourselves with the Old Testament. And I've heard people who said, no, the Old Testament, it's just full of violence, and it was written, it's just the history of Israel. Why must I concern myself with it? Well, no, I think that there is a lot that is in the Old Testament that we need to understand in order to be able to understand the New Testament. And yes, the prophet's words were true, proved to be true, and the Israelites who refused to surrender were slaughtered when the enemy broke through Jerusalem's gates. So now we're going to come to the message of Revelation 17, especially 18, and we'll understand, the application and how important it is for us to understand the application. And then Revelation 17 and 18 also, it says here in the lesson, it brings us an urgent message: decision time has come. It's interesting because we've studied in the previous lesson the plagues, the 7 plagues. So these were things that were happening already to people after they've taken the decision. So it was like a window into the future. This is what's going to happen. And now we're stepping back. And now the message is, you know what? To not be in that situation, to not go through that, it's important that we take a decision for God. And that's the bottom line, make a decision, take a stance for God, decide, choose to be on God's side. But you see, it's easier said than done, because I think that if we were to speak to anybody who is a person of faith, whichever church they may find themselves in, whichever religion they may be following, I think that most people will very sincerely tell you, and they will tell us, if we were to ask them, that they are on God's side. They are following what the Bible says. And that's why it's so important that we take the time to study in detail, try to understand, and see, are we on God's side? Have we positioned ourselves in a situation whereby unbiasedly we can make decisions that truly and factually place us on God's side? or is there still stuff that we need to work through? Now, as we've become used to, the book of Revelation is full of imagery, and it's very colorful. And there are some, some words and expressions that maybe, in this overly sensitive times that we're living, people get very offended very easily these days. People could be very offended. Wow, I don't want to read this. What is this? Sexual immorality, speaking about prostitutes. And speaking, well, what are you talking about? I want to read the Bible. What is this all about? And that's why, again, it's so important to understand the Old Testament, because there's a lot of language or imagery that's used in this prophetic book that needs to be understood within the context of how it was used in the past. So let's start. We're starting, chapter 17, and we're going to go through this again. I feel I have to repeat myself in this respect. Friends, we're not going to take every single word and try to, what does it mean? We're looking at a bigger picture, and there are certain expressions and words, and as you see them on the screen, I've highlighted them in bold or underlined, that we are going to spend a little bit more time on, just so that we understand the context of this chapter. So we spoke about the plagues, God's judgment, what's going to happen for the for the wicked. That's an expression from the Bible that, again, we're very careful not to use. We don't want to offend people, but I mean, there are those who are on God's side and those who are against God, whether they understand it or are aware of it or not. So here, the subtitle or the title of the chapter is The Great Prostitute and the Beast. Wow, that sounds very, unusual. We are not used to this kind of terminology, but it's in the Bible and we need to understand it. Then one of the seven angels, and again, friends, I'm not going to take the time to do a summary and, of the previous chapters. I am aware that we took a long break and we may have forgotten some of the stuff that we've studied previously. You can watch it online, or you can go back and read, chapters 15, 16, and then I think that, we'll be able to contextualize 17 and 18. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, the bowls, okay, that we're talking about, judgment and so on, came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters." So again, we're going to take it, step by step. So the great prostitute in the Old Testament, God had his chosen people through Abraham. So God chose Abraham, and out of him, he promised there's going to be a great nation that will be born. Abraham, we know that he tried to help God and caused all kinds of situations that we're confronted with even today, politically speaking. And but ultimately, God chose Israel. But the Israelites misunderstood in some respects this choosing, this election. They're not chosen as a special group of people in the sense of you are the only ones who are going to be saved, you are better than anyone else. No, they were chosen as vessels, as instruments through which God was going to make known to the whole world his plan of salvation in the coming of Jesus as the Messiah, Jesus, the Messiah, taking upon himself the sin of the world, dying in our place, and so on. So that was the reason why God said to Abraham, "Leave where you are. I'm going to set you aside." Actually, the word holy, I'll make you a holy nation. Holy doesn't necessarily mean without sin. It means set aside for a special purpose. I'm setting you aside, and so that you can teach the world about the coming of Jesus, my son. And the whole system of sacrifices and the sanctuary in the wilderness, and later on the temple and everything that was happening there, all those innocent lambs that were sacrificed, they were pointing towards Christ. And this nation was supposed to teach them how the rest of the world about the true God. And God expected from Israel to be faithful to him. All right. He said, I'm entering into a covenant with you, a marriage. All right. You are my bride. And remember this, throughout the Old Testament, prophets talk about this. And in the end of the Bible, at the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and Jesus used the same imagery of God marrying his bride, all right, which in the New Testament is the church. And if you remember, we did study about the woman in white that was pregnant, all right, so it represents the church and across centuries and giving birth to Christ. But coming back to the Old Testament, God and Israel, there was God entered a very special relationship, a covenant with Israel. So whenever Israel began to worship other gods, through his prophets, God would say, you have committed adultery, right? You've been unfaithful to me. So you have committed, and we've got it here as well, we're going to come to that, but it's not highlighted. You've committed sexual immorality, but not in the actual sexual act, but it was the matter of you've been unfaithful to me in a spiritual sense. So the prostitute here is, you've got the pure church, the faithful, and then you've got those who have altered and compromised the message and have given creation, they've created something that's corrupt, something that's been prostituted, if you want, all right? Something that's committed sexual immorality. I see that it's here. Let's read verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of sexual immorality that dwells on the earth have become drunk. So the whole idea is that here, the waters, that's many peoples, the kings, all those in power, people have been deceived from a spiritual standpoint in accepting teachings and a system, a religious system that's corrupt. Okay? Right, let me try and make it easier. So what we've got here in the end, if we look from the beginning of the Bible, you've got Cain and Abel, right? Abel faithful to God. God says, bring a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, again, symbolizing Jesus Christ. He was the lamb that was sacrificed. And Abel abided by God's command. He was faithful to God. But then you have Cain, who says, I'm going to bring you something else. I'm still going to sacrifice, but I'm not going to do it the way you say. I'm going to do it my way. There's jealousy between the two of them. Cain kills Abel. But from the start, you have the one who is faithful to God. And then you have the one who he dictates the terms on what being faithful to God is. And throughout the history of the world, but if we stay with the history of Israel, but throughout the history of the Bible, you always have this difference. You have a remnant that's faithful, because usually there are fewer than the majority. And then you have the other group that commit sexual spiritual immorality and are unfaithful to God. All right? The same thing happens in the end time. You're going to have, the pure woman, those who symbolize, the church or the people that are standing on what the Bible says and are trying to be as faithful as they can. And friends, here, right now, we're not talking about a specific church. We're talking about a group of people, all right? And then you also have the system of religion where God is still part of the whole equation, but it's been corrupted in so many ways that now this is not a pure church. It's not a pure religion. It's someone or a system that has been corrupted by different teachings that are not according to the scriptures. And waters, many people have followed that. Kings, many powers have followed that. And there comes a time when God says enough is enough, because that's the title of the lesson. Time is running out. And here, one of the angels says, okay, you've seen all those things that have happened to the earth and to the people who've been unfaithful, but you know what? The one who is responsible for everything is going to be judged as well. And now, again, we're not talking about the devil here. We are talking here about a system of belief, of religion. And that will also know its end. You need to know that. And this is, I want to go back to the way I started. This is good news. It means that sooner or later, God is going to say, you know what, enough is enough. And now I want to put an end to all this. And I want to bring the earth and the inhabitants of the earth to the point where I wanted it initially to be when I created them, without sin, without pain, without suffering, without death, and so on. So in verse 3, John the Revelator says, he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names. And it had 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, 7 and 10. These are very important numbers. It represents completion. It represents, this is the ultimate system, the ultimate complete way of what deception is all about. This woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. That's, it's sumptuous, it's rich, it's visible, it's glorified in human terms. It's adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. Now, try and imagine this picture. I mean, it's if we look on the screen, it looks okay. But the description itself, I mean, some of the stuff you really want to read through very quickly, especially the last part of verse 4. What it means is that there is a lot of pomp, there's a lot of stuff that hits the eye and impresses people, and but in actual fact, it's corrupt to the core. Lately, I've seen a lot of videos on the internet about prosperity preachers, people who speak to their congregations and they say, God has shown me that I need to buy a jet because, I can't travel economy. The devil is just, there are too many demons on the plane, so I have to have my own plane. And all the prosperity gospel, all these things. And I want us to understand, when we're talking about the pure woman, I'm saying it again, it's in the end, there may be a movement, and there is a movement that is going to make the difference. But right now, we're talking here about a group of people, and it could be from different, it is a matter of people's heart here. But then when we're talking about this, it's more than just the prostitute. It's more than just one church. We can't just say that's it's a whole system. And it's corrupt to the core. Instead of preaching humility, instead of living with dignity, instead of living with integrity and being a witness to the world and staying close to the scriptures and understanding the commandments of God and respecting what God says, this system, within the system, there are so many ways in which the Bible can be corrupted and people can be deceived. All right, so there's completeness here. There are 7 heads, and when you have 7 heads looking in different directions, going in different directions, and on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great. Okay, so Babylon. Now, we spoke about Jeremiah. Babylon was a nation, an empire in the Old Testament. We talked about that also when we studied the book of Daniel. And the name Babylon comes from Babel. And we know right at the beginning of the scriptures in Genesis, it speaks about the time when people got together and they wanted to build a tower to reach up to God. Now, we don't have time to unpack that, but it wasn't just about building a building. It was the same desire that we read about Lucifer having to, to be like God, to sit on his throne, and that, to dethrone God, if you want. And God intervened by confusing their languages. All right, so they couldn't understand each other. And, in very simple terms, I know that linguistically there are all kinds of explanations, but in very simple terms, what happened is that people began to speak different languages. They couldn't get along. They couldn't understand each other, so they had to abandon the project. Now, Babel means confusion. And this is exactly what happens. And this is what I want us to remain with for tonight. We're going to read about it. There's a call to come out of this situation. But Babylon is a religious system. It's more than just religious, political as well, social, but let's stay with the religious side. But that breeds confusion, that brings about manipulation. And coming out of it, we're going to read about that. It's crucial, because we need, how do we come out of it? Studying the Word of God and receiving clarity. All right, the more we study God's Word, the more we study the Bible, the more we try to understand it prayerfully and ask God to reveal to us what the Bible actually says, then we become more clear, we receive more peace. We have a clearer understanding of how God works, what God expects of us, and how we can be faithful to God. And by doing that and being faithful to what we read and we understand, in that way, that's one way of actually coming out of it. And I'm preempting here because we haven't come to that verse yet. All right, but on this, so as I've presented, what does it mean that it's sexual immorality and it's a prostitute? I've explained that. Now I've explained the name Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of earth's abomination. So this is right. Again, it brings it all together. It's the main thing. This is the mother of it all. And then in verse 6, and there's another indication of what she's guilty of. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And looking at the history of the church and the history of the world, we will understand where the martyrs were and where it all started, from the Roman Empire, and then it became a religious system, and then it began to kill away or to martyr all those who were speaking against this religious system. So just to summarize, in Scripture, Babylon symbolizes the confusion of false teachings, a mixture of religious truth and error. And this is the most powerful thing, friends. I mean, let's be honest. If someone comes to you with a very clear lie, maybe it's raining outside, and they come to you and say, "Oh, the sun is shining outside." Just look through the window and it's very clear. No, it's not. It's raining. So a lie, an obvious lie, you're not going to buy into it, But what happens is that very often deception, manipulation, and confusion comes when there's a mixture of religious truth and error. I want to be very honest with you. Sometimes I get frustrated. Is not the right word. Neither is angry. Something in between. When I see how some people misuse the Scriptures for their own benefit, be it financial gain, be it influence, be it power, and I believe that in the day of judgment, God is going to hold these people accountable more than, anyone else. Because to be entrusted and to have the privilege to hold the Bible in your hand, I think if we don't understand that the Bible is there so that it can discover the sin within us and help us to, receive forgiveness and get closer to God, treat other people better, be patient, be understanding. That's what the Bible is for. reflect more of his character to the world. But instead of doing all that, to misuse it and abuse it for personal gain, or to put someone else down, or to judge someone else, I think that's really, really, we need to be very careful in that respect. Revelation 17, 7-18, because here we stopped at verse 6. I'm just going to give a very brief summary here, because we don't have time to go into everything. These verses tell us that men will fail, human religious systems will fail, nations will form alliances or allegiances to thwart God's kingdom. All right, so people sometimes ask me, Pastor Dylan, what do you think is happening in this situation or that situation? And I always say, friends, there's a lot we don't know. But I am absolutely convinced that there are a lot of agendas and there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes. And I know, as much as I believe that there is a God who is alive and who loves me and who wants me to be saved, I also believe there is a devil, and the devil hates God, and the devil hates anyone who loves God and follows God, and the devil wants this world to be his, even though he knows that he's been defeated on Calvary when Jesus died, and after he was resurrected. He's still trying. He's trying to get as many people away from God as possible, because he knows that's how he will be able to hurt God. And the devil uses political systems, the devil uses economics, the devil uses psychology, and I truly believe that there are partnerships, and there are political corporations, and whatever you want to go, economical plans that have Satan's stamp. Now, I don't know which ones, and I don't know exactly in which way. And what I'm absolutely and solely concerned with is to make sure that I am not deceived in my faith. Now, whether I understand or I don't understand what's going on, I try to, but I refrain from attaching too much significance to various things, because I may be wrong. What I know is that there's no doubt in my mind, as in we're told in Revelation 17, that there are systems and there are people and there are powers at work that are trying to take us or get us away from God. Now, in this description of Babylon's fall, God is again summarizing the history of nations and events from the rise of ancient Babylon to the coming of Christ. So in these verses, again, there's like, a revisit of everything that's happened in symbolic language in some respects. So here Babylon is identified. All right, it's a religious, political system that breeds confusion, wants to deceive people, wants people of faith to commit spiritual adultery and betray God. Okay? And there's a lot that happens behind the scenes, and that's the interest. But look at what verse 18, chapter 18 says, the fall of Babylon. Now, Babylon conquered Israel. Babylon took many people captive. But this great kingdom, as we studied in Daniel 2, for example, came to an end. And all this work that the devil is doing behind the scenes, and this very intricate, eloquent, pompous, great in the sight of man system and systems that seek to corrupt people's hearts and their minds and to take them away from God will fail and will fall. And this is what we read about in Revelation 18. And again, friends, we're reading the Bible. This is not just another book. Okay, this is the Bible. And I assume everybody here on this platform believes that this is God's word. Okay, so what we're talking about here and what I'm saying is not, please forget, where I come from and I'm not promoting a church, a religion. We're reading the Bible. This is the primary purpose of us looking into these verses. And the Bible is speaking about truth and error. The Bible is saying that error is not just error and, lie, and that's it, very easy to identify. No, it's truth corrupted. All right? It's truth, a bit of error, and the main agenda is to deceive. All right? But this system, there will come a point in time where God is going to say, enough, time is running out. This is the title of the lesson. And Babylon will fall. As the Babylon of old was destroyed, God will step in and end the dominion, and will end the success of this force and remove it. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. And the earth was made bright with his glory, and he called out with a mighty voice. So this is someone coming from the throne of God. There's this, and the wording here is very important. Coming from heaven, great authority, bright with his glory. Well, you may have an idea of what this means. And he called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons. Now, you see, it says here she has become. It means it wasn't that before. So this was a place where God was supposed to worship, where people believed they were being faithful to God. But because of so much compromise, theological and otherwise, because of the corruption of the beautiful truths of the Bible, this now has become a dwelling place for demons. A haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. Right? There was a time when Jesus got very upset. He went to the temple and he realized that in that temple, in the temple courts actually, people were selling clean animals that were supposed to be sacrificed at the temple. So they were doing that kind of business in a place where they're not supposed to be doing it. And he got very upset with it. He chased those people away. Now here, it's very interesting. There's a parallel here, if you want, that this place that was supposed to be a place where God was being glorified, now it has become the dwelling place of unclean birds, unclean spirits, unclean and detestable beasts. Verse 3 is worrying. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Again, I don't want to speculate too much, but all I know is that this entity, again, as a whole, but there is someone at the head. This has been able and had the influence to attract and corrupt all nations. Do you understand the kind of influence it has? The kings of the earth. And this is very important, the merchants of the earth. So this is about economics. So this is a power, this is an influence that stretches way beyond just theological or religious authority. Okay, but the power of the system will come to an end. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, and this is the crux of our message, come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. I think that this is probably one of the most important messages in the Bible for you and me. I believe that we're living in a time where it is very clear Even though it appears that religion doesn't play such an important role anymore in the community, trust me, it does. And there are religious forces behind the scenes that are, interfering and, pulling and pushing. But let's forget about all those influences and all those agendas that we don't know much about and we can't change anything about. This is a time where I believe here in the book of Revelation, the message is for the people living in the last days, you and I, where I have to take the Bible in my hands. And as I read it and prayerfully read it, I need to come to a point where I need to ask myself what I believe. Is it solely in the Bible? Or there are things that I believe, things that I follow, things that I've done that I cannot find in the Bible. Why do I worship on this day? Why do I go to church on this day? Why do I believe this? Why do I believe that? Prayerfully, I have to ask myself this question, because if it is a matter of confusion, corruption, if it is a matter of things that have creeped into popular belief, and God takes it so seriously because he says, listen, I'm holy. I cannot coexist with anything that's corrupt. So by virtue of you not abiding in that which I have left in the scriptures, which is supposed to be truth that leads you to me, there will come a time when I'll have to put an end to all corruption, and unfortunately to those who have been affected by corruption if they have not come out of it. This message, friends, I think is for every single one of us. I need to ask myself, do I understand what Babylon is? Do I understand what Babylon, some of the teachings of Babylon are all about? Now I understand, we've understood from here the agenda. We've understood, the reason why it's there. We understand its destiny, if you want, its fate, because God has said, this is what's going to happen. Set in stone, it will be destroyed. And do I understand that, wow, if it's not in the Bible, then I need to leave it behind. It's very hard. I don't want to get too personal, but my mom prayed for my dad. I think I shared this with you, or maybe I didn't. For 20 years. For 20 years, she prayed for him. There are certain things that my dad still had to come to understand himself. And it's not an easy decision. It's not something that, it's easy to do. Because sometimes, if we discover that something that we've been taught and we've believed for a long, long time, it's not in the Bible, it's not part of God's, revealed truth. And I'm using these words intentionally. It's very hard to accept it. But the bottom line of the message is, listen, if it's not, then you need to come out of it. You need to leave it behind. I want to finish this chapter. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so this is Babylon. This is just, this is imagery again. This is symbolism again. This is how powerful it is. And, it doesn't matter how big the stone is. It doesn't matter how big it can be a millstone, I don't know, tens of, even thousands of tons, in weight. Once you throw it into the sea, it disappears. It's gone. The sea will just swallow it up. It's as if it never existed. And this is not just for impact, that the fall of Babylon that's being illustrated here, but it's also the decisiveness of God. God says, I created humanity to be with me for eternity, in peace, in health, in harmony with me. Sin has messed it up. And now I need to get rid of it completely. I need to eradicate it. And unfortunately, even when it came to, the Bible itself, people have used it and misused it and abused it in a way that have confused people, have created systems of beliefs, have created churches and religions that instead of these systems and religions bringing them people closer to me, they are taking them away from me. I need to put an end to this, so that what is true and pure stands. So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more, and the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more, and the light of a lamp will shine in you no more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all have been slain on earth. So much evil has been done in the name of religion. And when a religious system becomes more than what it's supposed to be, and sometimes with good intentions, and it becomes corrupted, then it doesn't serve the purpose that it was intended. And God says, you know what? I don't need it. In the Old Testament, he says, I don't need your sacrifices. You don't impress me with sacrifices. I want pure hearts. We need to be very careful now. We're not going to go out there and start accusing, people from different churches. Oh, you're Babylon, you're Babylon. You're teaching this and that, and it's not in the Bible. You're Babylon. That's not Christ-like. We need to be aware of it, and then as witnesses, to live in a way that people will want to know more. They will ask us, why do you do this? Why don't you do that? Why is it that even though, my father used to be asked, you're born in this tradition, why aren't you going to church? Why aren't you doing this or that? And then once my father, understood what the Bible said, he would say, no, but I'm going to church, but I'm not going on the same day that you're going. Why not? And he wouldn't tell them, oh, you are in Babylon, that's why. No, he would say, look, I read in the Bible, God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh, he rested. He called it the Sabbath, and that's on Saturday. I don't find it in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible do I find that God changed it. I understand from history how it came about, but that wasn't God's instruction. And I remember my father having a conversation with one of my uncles and saying, you know what? Just because you attach a certain meaning to Sunday, which is a beautiful, that's when Jesus was resurrected. But no, even after his resurrection, Jesus didn't say, because I resurrected on Sunday, I want you to worship me from now on that day. My father is a very straight man. And he spoke that stayed with me. There was a time when I questioned my own faith and my own religion. Why do I have to follow my parents? It's their faith. I remember my friends teasing me about the church that I used to attend. And I remember, I'm ashamed to say that now, but I remember telling them, no, that's not my church, it's my mother's church. And I had to go through a process of understanding for myself. Okay, is this what the Bible says? Why should God be important to me? Why is it important to worship on a particular day? Why is it important to live in a certain way? Why is it important to this or that or the other? And I realized it's not about impressing God. It's not, we cannot do anything to make God love us more or love us less. And there was a time when I had to make a decision. Yeah, I want to be part of this, not because of my mom or because of my father's experience. I want to be part of it because I believe in it. And there was a time when my father came out of it. And I think that this is a message that every single one of us needs to take very seriously. The bottom line, And I always say this: anything I do, everything I do, if I truly believe there is a God, I need to take him into account. And I need to ask myself, is this bringing me closer to him? Is this giving more meaning to my life? Is what I read in the Bible truly bringing about clarity in my mind? Is it making me feel that I live to the full potential? Because that's what God says, you know, Jesus says, and I want you to give them life in abundance. I remember in one of my last sermons, I said, listen, it would be so sad if we just pretend to take our faith seriously. Because we'd really then just miss out on so many other things that, you know, the world considers to be so important and so much fun. And, you know, we would miss heaven too. I don't think there's anything in this world worth us losing what God has prepared for us. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. You know, I look forward to the day when, yeah, the Babylon will be thrown into the sea, sin will disappear, Christ will come again, and then, oh boy, we'll read and we'll study together to be able to witness the recreation of this world, and then to explore the creation of God in the entire universe. You know, wow, we can't even comprehend what that would be like to be saved. It is my prayer that we'll all experience that. Thank you.